here we go. Starting. 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone. This is Corey with Camera Coach, and welcome to another episode of Full Frame with Corey. My name is Corey Denigan, and I am a photography teacher and freelance photographer. I'm here to talk about pretty much anything and all things photography. Currently, we've been kind of on a kick just talking about equipment, and so that's kind of something that we're kind of running through that vein right now. But we talk about a lot of things. We talk about business. We talk about just what people can do just to get better generally. I do interviews and all that sort of stuff, and a new episode will drop every Tuesday. So that's just a little info about the podcast, a little bit more about Camera Coach, myself. We do sports, event, and portrait photography, along with doing another side of things, which is photo education. And so that's something I'm really excited about, trying to make sure that they balance out. And so I'm not constantly just doing photo shoots and photo shoots and photo shoots. Because of my background as an educator in the public schools and actually teaching commercial photography for a while, I am now doing private lessons. I do workshops. I do other things. Just this podcast is another example of just ways to try and give some information about photography, because there's so much you can actually learn. Whether you're in it for the artistic side or the technical side or both, I just believe there's something for everybody in photography. So there you go. You can check out the website, photocameracoach.com. Again, photocameracoach.com. And you can find a lot of other things, including recommendations for equipment if you're in the market looking to kind of upgrade or something like that. All right, so let's move on. Right, so that's a little bit about Camera Coach. Enough about me and the business. Want to just take a minute and say thank you to a few people. First of all, a big shout out to Rogue Media Network, who has facilitated the distribution of this podcast since it started back in July of 2022. And so this space that I'm in is actually theirs, so it's a pretty cool spot where I can go, and I know that I'm not going to have 2 or 3 kiddos that are going to come through the door or something like that, or just not really trying to record at home, which is actually a blessing for me. So big thanks to Rogue Media, and then also some thank yous go out to my level 2 Patreon supporters. So that would be Corey, Kenan, Renee, Dominique, Mandy. You guys are great. I really appreciate you just kind of supporting and allowing this to grow. So that is something that we'll talk a little bit more about at the end of the episode, just so you can find out if you'd like to support, because I definitely would love it. It would help me to kind of up the quality and the quantity of the podcast and some other things that are just recently starting. So, all right, special guest today. No one in person, but I do have my Superman bobblehead who's making an appearance, and a couple of drones. So, as you might suspect, if you look at the table, or if you hear me say that I have drones on the table, then I'm probably going to talk about drones, right? And so that is pretty much what I'm going to dive into today. All right, and so I'm going to go through a few basics. I mean, most people know what a drone is, or at least have some concept, but just to go through all the basics and kind of make sure we're on the same page, right? So always try to make sure, define what the product is, so that way, like I said, we're on the same page, right? So a drone is basically an unmanned aerial vehicle, so UAV for short, and it can be used for personal use, just recreation, or it can be used for business use, like if you're a photographer or videographer, then, or even other things. They use them for a lot of different reasons. And so they may not have a camera on them. Not all of them do, but we are specifically talking about photography here, right? Full frame, right? So we're going to talk about photo and video drones. All right. And so pros and cons. Really quickly, let's talk about some positives, some good things about drones. So number one, well, it's a flying camera, right? So that means that if you're into trying to find unique angles for things, right? So viewpoint stuff, then it's a really cool thing to have. Okay, so definitely a great thing to give you some unique angles, aerial shots, that sort of thing. And then if you get into video, or you are a videographer, then you're talking about being able to get some of those shots, the panning shots, even just, I would say some of them have zoom lenses now, which is amazing. And so you've got a lot of cool things you can do. So along with just kind of the unique angles, there's some unique features, some cool features. A lot of them have enough technology to actually track a subject or to lock on a subject and then move based on that subject, kind of like circulate or something like that. So many things you can actually do. And so a lot of that, again, kind of feeds into more of the videography side of things, right? But very, very, very cool. And it's mobile. I mean, this guy right here, right, is like the size of my hand once it collapses, right? So if I take the propellers and I close them down, it's the size of my hand. So it's small, and even the larger one that I have here on the table, which is the Mavic Pro, it's not huge, right? So I mean, there are some big drones out there. There's some big ones, but really portability and being able to like set up, get going, and then get some unique shots pretty quickly is definitely a pro. Definitely a positive thing there, right? So I spent a little bit of time there on the pros, so we're going to flip the coin, right, and take a look at some of the cons, some of the things that may be a drawback for you if you are in the market or trying to think through, well, do I need a drone, right, that kind of thing, because that's really one thing that I want this to be for. Right, so number one, these guys aren't cheap, okay? As I mentioned, the two that I have on the table, I have a DJI Mavic Pro and a DJI Mavic Air. So there are other brands. DJI is actually pretty well known. I'm not saying that this is the only one to have, but it's just the brand that I went for. Okay, and so there are some other reputable ones. And so if you want more information about that, we can talk about that later. So these right here, usually, you buy a drone, and then you might need an extra battery or two. You might need a case. This and that, and just maybe even filters for the lens, depending on how serious you are about just kind of the quality of your shots, and so it adds up because the drone itself usually is going to run you, if we're talking a high quality photo video drone, we're talking probably $700-800 on up, okay. And so like I said, it's basically like buying another good middle or high end camera, if you will. Right, camera body, and so the price can be kind of a deterrent for some. You definitely don't want to go on the super cheap end on these because they're all over the place, right? You can go to Amazon and find a bunch of different drone options that are shipped from overseas, and whatever, the pictures look fine, but it's just a matter of, well, are you going to invest in something that's going to just kind of fall apart on you in a few months, or are you trying to make a wise purchase? Right, and so make sure you do your research if you're in the market. That's basically what I'm saying there. So it's pricey, and another thing I would say is just because it's a flying object, I would say that it's got some delicacy to it, right? So it can be delicate in a sense. You can mess up the propellers, the arms right here, right? So I keep reaching for this guy and kind of showing, right? So if you damage something, the lens can get damaged, and you can't really just kind of swap out the lens, right? It's not as interchangeable like a DSLR or something. And so you've got to really kind of make sure that you're aware, like when you're using it and everything, carrying it even, it's not really something that you can just throw around. And so most people, I mean, that makes sense, but if you're gonna make this purchase, then you got to know, hey, well, then how am I carrying it? Like, do I have a good case? All those sort of things. And then when you have it out, you really have to be attentive, right? So there you go. So it's pricey. It can be pretty delicate. I've got 3 kids at home, and so even last week, my kids were like, "Hey, will you practice flying the drone right over the weekend or something like that?" And naturally, the next question, if I do that, is, hey, can we practice flying it? Can we kind of hold the remote too and use it? And the answer is obviously no, because I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old right now, and so that's one where it's like, hey, I'm going to get a little bitty drone that we can play around with, but this is not a toy, okay? And so if you're looking at this from the vantage point of like, oh, it's a cool thing, right? Yes, it's cool, but save your money if that's the only thing you think about for a drone, okay? All right, let's move on. The other drawback I would say to this is because these things are flying objects and they can actually achieve pretty good altitude. They can go pretty high, some of them. Then you're dealing with restrictions, okay? And so I'm talking like FAA, right? So like really real restrictions. Where you can fly, where you can't fly, how high you can fly, rules about flying over people and public spaces. I mean, there's stuff there, okay? And so just because you might say, hey, I'm doing this for recreation, does not really exempt you from those restrictions. And so a lot of people, I would say when drones just got really, really popular, it was a cool thing to get, right? And so everyone would go get a drone and they'd fly it, and then they just do whatever they wanted with it. And they would even maybe use it commercially without having the license to get it, like to do that professionally. And so there are a lot of things that come into play if you're looking at this from a vantage point of, hey, I'm a videographer or a photographer, and I could use this to make some money, right? Yes, you can, but there are restrictions, and you want to go about this the right way, because if you don't, then you're treading some shaky ground there, okay? And so I'm not really going to ever recommend that you do something that could put yourself in jeopardy, because if you make the wrong choice on something like this, you're out a lot of money, and then you're talking about if you get citations or something like that for breaking these regulations, then that's even more money. Okay, and so it's a lot, and so it's one of those things actually that slowed down my progression with the drones, because I've had a drone for a while, and so I got it. I thought it was kind of cool, and I practiced, and then I was like, okay, well, if I'm really going to do this, I need to go ahead and get my certification, right? So I need to go ahead and take the test so I can have my license to fly the drone commercially, and I can use it for real estate, whatever, all those sort of things. But that's really what slowed me down, is just kind of getting that license so I can do things the right way. All right, now that's a long little segment there, but I feel like kind of laying the groundwork is the most important thing in what you're thinking of when you look at a drone, right? And so, or not just looking at a drone, but if you should have one. And that's just something that is a personal decision, but there's some things that you definitely need to consider. All right, so let's move on to, well, how does it work, right? Well, so the specific ones I have here are quadcopters. So they have 4 propellers, and I'll grab the different one here. All right, so the Mavic Pro, right? So this one, it's got 4 propellers right there. Camera right here on the lens, it's covered. It's got a little cover there. I'm not taking it off. There's really no need right now, so it's just there. And so what you would do is you would turn it on, and then you would connect it either to your phone or the remote. Okay, and so once they are connected, then you can launch, and then you can fly from there. I'm not going to spend the time in a small room trying to set up the drone and launch it, because that's just not safe, number one. And that's kind of the name of the game. You want to do things safely, and then if it's not safe for me or the things in this room, then that means it's not safe for the drone either, right? So there will be more content if you are interested in finding out maybe like how the drone works specifically and how it sets up and those sort of things. I'll do a separate video for that and just kind of walk through just maybe a point of view where you can see how I'm setting it up and launching it. And we'll go that route. Okay, so it connects to a phone or remote. Actually, the remote plugs into the phone, and then it gives you like the space to actually see what the drone sees, and then you record from there and you fly it from there. So a lot to take into account when you are flying, because yes, you're going to have to keep track of this thing in the air, and you're trying to frame shots, right? And so that's why there are regulations, because a lot of times if you're doing it commercially, the rule is basically to make sure that there's someone who has an eye on the drone at all times. And then there's like the person that's maybe controlling, right, and that sort of thing. So, anyways, so let's move on. Things to consider. So things to consider. I've thrown a lot of those in already, but one thing to think about is payload and size, because if you live in a place that's very windy, then sometimes you're going to have to just like know when to fold and say it's not really a good idea to take the drone out, right? So weather plays a big factor into flight, and that's something that you always want to consider. So a smaller drone, like my Mavic Air here, I obviously would not take it out in, there's 20 mile per hour winds or something. It can actually hold its own. Honestly, it's not bad, but if you're looking at making the wisest choice, drones can malfunction all the time, right? And so you get a good gust of wind, it blows it in the wrong place, and then you're out $1,000, $1,500. Not really the choice I want to make, right? So a lot of this is more risk management, if you will. So There you go. Boom. All right. So that's really one of the main things, to just kind of know what you're getting into, because I've already kind of mentioned some of the other things to consider, and just do your research. Make sure it's a reputable brand, and that it'll do the things that you want. So if you know you want specific features, or you're trying to do certain shots, then make sure that that specific model you're looking at is going to do what you want. Okay, and so that's just really kind of the main thing. If I were to boil it down, then I would say that the drone is kind of like the gimbal. And a gimbal, like I mentioned in the gimbal episode, it's really for videography, right? So you get smooth shots, you put a camera on it, and it's got some motors to help make sure that you're not really just really jittery when you're moving. And so this guy here is another example of I would say a very, very unique tool. So there's a niche for it, and it's a cool thing, but if you're looking at usefulness and if it's for you, then you've got to be into videography, or maybe you have a little money and you want to experiment with some aerial shots for architecture or something like that, or just kind of street photography, and you're just out and about. But that's a very, very, very small niche right there. And for the money, I would say, that's not enough, honestly, in my opinion. So for me, I got it because I know that I would like to get into doing some real estate, and so that's kind of a no-brainer for that one, because aerial shots are really important, the photography, and then being able to do the videography, just little pans and that sort of stuff, right? And so so that's pretty much it. I think it is still primarily, in my opinion, drones are primarily mostly still for video. Right, and so there's the time-lapse features and other stuff that are cool, but if you're looking, major use, definitely video. And so, yeah, it might be a stretch for some people, but, if it's in your budget and it's something you want to do, then who am I to stop you? But so that's my recommendation, all right? So I'm going to close this thing out. Really, this is just kind of short and sweet, talking a little bit about drones, what they are, how they work, and if they're for you, right? And so, excuse me, sorry about that. So this is it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And if you would like to connect and talk some more about drones or any other piece of equipment, then you can do that several different ways. You can actually text us at 254-307-7469, and please give a little bit of time for response, obviously. So that's one thing there. Say 24 hours to respond. That'd be great. You can also find us on social media. Okay, and so I recently just started a TikTok, which is obviously like the short form video, right? And then there's Facebook and there's Instagram. So Facebook is by far probably the bigger of the accounts, and so you can find me at Photo Camera Coach for Facebook, and then for Instagram it's actually different. It's camera.coach. Okay, TikTok follows the same as Instagram. That's camera.coach. If you're searching, you might have to do the @ symbol and then camera.coach. I'm not particularly sure, but I think that might be a thing for TikTok. Okay, and then the YouTube channel is actually new. I'd say that's something that's developing, getting back into posting videos specifically of the podcast. So I'm recording this podcast here, and then so a few of these will be out for the public, just for anyone to have access to. But the weekly drops are going to be for my Patreon supporters. And so I'll go ahead and jump into that really quick deal about Patreon. So it is a platform that a lot of artists and other creatives use to gather support, financial support, and that allows a number of different things. So for me, it'll allow me to do more of these, more types of things for photo education and at a higher quality. All right, so another thing about Patreon, if you are willing to become a supporter, right, as I mentioned, there are levels, and so $5 a month is where it starts off. And there are different things that come with each level. Now, if you are even looking to go beyond that, you can become a sponsor. Everyone gets recognition, just kind of depends on how much, depending on the level that you're on. So anyways, that's one way that you can support as well. And then you can also join in workshops that are coming, or sign up for private training as well. So those are things that I'm developing for the spring. So April, May, June, you'll see a lot more about that coming up. Okay? All right, so again, thanks for listening. I will close out, give you the website one more time, photocameracoach.com. And I'm going to sign off of this thing. Hope you guys have an amazing day. Bye.